Volunteering. It's great, no? It can link up different cultures, it can spark passion, and it can educate. Moreover, it can make real difference in all kinds of issues. It is wonderful, but today I want to talk about the other side of all this, a point of view that I feel is sometimes ignored. Back in August, I went to an exhibition. There were images, horrifying and vivid images of the war in Syria, positioned around the room like it was the most natural thing in the world. They captured me, and afterwards I was determined to get involved. And so, in December 2015, I went to Calais, a refugee camp nicknamed the jungle. There are several thousand refugees there, living or at least existing in terrible conditions. Initially, I only worked there for a couple of weeks and then I came home. Afterwards, I was certain that I was an expert. I was sure that I understood the situation and I was sure that I had made a difference. I was arrogant. It was only after I kept working for 5 more months that I realized the grievous mistakes that I had made. When I had started volunteering, I had no training, I had no experience, and I had even less knowledge. I was working with vulnerable people who had been bombed in Syria, had almost drowned in the Mediterranean, had been disregarded by politicians in Europe, and had been tear-gassed, beaten, and abused in Calais. They had deep psychological scars, and I was not prepared to deal with these problems. I was out of my depth. I desperately needed training. The mistakes that I and others made soured the already awful environment that the refugees were living in. Thankfully, I kept working, and eventually I did make some kind of a difference. But regardless, I needed that training at the start. In our society, volunteering is a very romantic idea. And I think this attitude is the cause of many problems that we associate with volunteering. Time and time again, I witnessed volunteers who breezed in and breezed out, do a good deed, cleanse their soul, and then head back home in time for tea. It was almost like some kind of a warped secular pilgrimage. This is the refugee crisis. Doesn't look like a holiday to me. A common trope that is regurgitated again and again is that we were all there for the same reason. Well, I ask you the question, why are you doing this and who are you doing this for? It's not always just because you want to help. Many groups justify their lack of comprehensive training because they say they have too many other things to deal with. It's just a petty detail. But it is a small investment that can have long-term consequences. By training and briefing of volunteers, you can solve many of the previous issues, or at least help solve the issues I was mentioning earlier. Under careful observation, volunteers can be a crucial part of aid. Looking at it through the lens of the refugee crisis, large groups such as the UN are accused of neglecting the day-to-day necessities required to live. The basic human rights of refugees are not met from the support given by these large groups. This is a gap that has been filled, at least in Greece and France to some extent, by volunteering groups. The flexibility that they have means they can move with speed to react to the refugee crisis that is inherently dynamic. Their political and financial freedom means they can move to do what is necessary as fast as possible. If you take anything from this talk, if you would like to volunteer, research and prepare. Before you dive into an issue, make sure you understand it. Don't make the same mistakes I did, and make sure you choose a team that will train you. I do not want to discourage anyone from volunteering. It is fantastic. But before you go, ask yourself, at the end of the day, who are you volunteering for? Thank you.